turned that phase of the war around completely, because they were able to get behind the North Koreans, force them around, and force them back up north, because they didn't have the logistics trained to support them that far away from home. Well, we arrived on scene and had our first operations on the 10th of October, and by this time, the Allied forces, the Americans and the North Koreans, were pushing the North Koreans up closer to China. China, incidentally, during this time, had warned the Americans that if they got too close to China, they would enter the war. And there was a great deal of concern in Washington on the part of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, the combined Chiefs of Staff in England, that we may tempt the Chinese to come into the battle. A fellow named Jesse Brown was in our squadron. Jesse Brown was born in Hattiesburg, Mississippi. He's a young black boy. His father was a sharecropper. Jesse was a good student. He was a good athlete in school. He had always wanted to fly, but he knew he could never get into military aviation because the blacks, as far as he knew, were not allowed in aviation, although they did have the Tuskegee Airmen, which is a completely black outfit. But he was encouraged to get into aviation at the Ohio State University, and got his wings and became the first naval aviator. He was assigned to the squadron that I was assigned to, and was a young officer. He was an ensign, and was considered to be one of the real promising pilots in the squadron. He and I were flying in the same flight one day when we were conducting an armed reconnaissance mission in support of the troops. We were probably flying over Colonel Wiedhahn at the time. And he called that he'd lost oil pressure, probably because he was shot from below, and it pierced his oil line, and he crashed on the side of this mountain. And because of the intensity of the crash, when the plane landed, it buckled at the cockpit, so the fuselage was bent at about a 20 or 25 degree angle, and smoke was coming out from under the cowling. There's no doubt on the minds of any of us flying overhead that he perished in the crash. So the flight leader left us, climbed a better altitude to get good communications, to call for a rescue helicopter to try to do what he could for the deposed aviator. But while he was gone, Jesse had opened the canopy of his cockpit and waved to us to let us know that he was alive. But for some reason, he didn't get out of the airplane. And then we got the word from the flight leader that a helicopter was on the way, but it would take at least half an hour before he could get up there. So I felt that because of the smoke that may burst into flame, that before the helicopter could get there, that the flame would overtake Jesse. So I made the decision at that time to land as close as I could to him, pull him out of the cockpit just to wait for the rescue helicopter. And I was able to do so. I was very fortunate. It wasn't as if I was crashing into a mountain, but it was on a slight upslope, and snow covered the ground, about 2 feet of snow. And the temperature there, Warren mentioned 35 degrees below zero. It probably wasn't that cold at that time, but it was down around zero, and probably got that 35 below that night, because all those nights it was that cold. And this was about 3,000 feet elevation above sea level. When I got to the airplane, I could see that Jesse didn't get out of the airplane because of the way the fuselage was bent. It had pinned him into the cockpit, so he couldn't. His knee was jammed against the side of the cockpit and a control panel that we straddled in flight. Well, the snow on the soles of my boots made them just like ice, so that I couldn't get any leverage, any firm footing on the airplane. So I was having to hang on to the edge of the cockpit with one hand. It was very awkward to do anything else, but there's nothing I could do to free him, pull him out. So I went back to the airplane, and my airplane, which was unflyable, but the radio still worked, so I called on the radio if the helicopter hadn't left to have him bring up a fire extinguisher and an axe. And the pilot did get that word, and I found later on that he had already taken off with a crewman when he heard that there were two of us that he had to take back. Helicopters in those days were quite small and quite delicate, so he couldn't carry more than 3 people in his airplane, so he had to drop his crewman off to be able to take both of us back. And he did bring up a fire extinguisher and an axe. But when he arrived, he had to land on the side of the hill, and it took him at least 5 minutes before he could land. He kept hovering around and going over to another place, and I learned later on that the brakes on his helicopter weren't reliable, and he was afraid that if he landed there, even though it was in the snow, that the helicopter might have rolled down the mountain, so we'd all be in trouble. But he successfully did land. But when he got over, even the two of us working to get Jesse out of the cockpit, we were unsuccessful. During this time, I was talking with Jesse, but in spite of the injury he must have suffered, he was very lucid. He was not panicked at all. I can't believe the calmness that he had. He was giving me more confidence. I should have been giving him confidence. But then he had lapsed off, presumably in unconsciousness or great fatigue from what he'd just gone through. And when it became apparent to Charlie and me that we couldn't move him, the helicopter pilot, his name was First Lieutenant Charlie Ward, pulled me aside, and because dusk was approaching, he said he had to get out of there because he couldn't fly in the mountains with the instrumentation he had. So we had to leave Jesse there, and we told him we didn't have the equipment to help him. We're going back, get equipment, and come back, which we knew was not so. But I don't even know if he heard us because he probably perished while we were at that time. So I was taken down to a Marine camp about 15 miles away, a place called Hagaruri at the foot of the Chosin Reservoir. And it was a new experience for me because we'd spent all of our time aboard an aircraft carrier. Incidentally, our carrier was about 50 to 75 miles offshore, and we'd fly across the water to where the operations area was. And so those of us on the carriers never saw anything on the ground from ground level. It was always from a couple thousand feet up. But I was put up in a small tent. It was designed for 4 people, and ended up, I was 10 of us were in that tent that night. It was the coldest night I ever spent, and spent that night there. And the weather was so bad that they couldn't send in an airplane to take me back to my ship. So 3 days later, they did send an airplane in, and I remember looking at the calendar over the operations desk while waiting for the airplane, and the date was December 7th, which at that time was a really significant date because that's the 9th anniversary of the start of World War II. But I was taken back out to the ship, and the captain of the ship had gotten no real clear, credible information on what had happened. They weren't even sure that Jesse had died or whether he had been saved because communications during that day were so poor. There was conflicting information. But when he finally heard what the word was,